Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm your host, Jordan Jones. We are down to less than 3 weeks until Big Ten football returns and Purdue hosts Iowa to kick off the 2020 season. Today, we will continue our preview of the 2020 Purdue football team by breaking down the defense and the special teams units. This is a loaded episode today. I'm not sure I've been this excited for a show since our first ever episode back in May, so let's jump right in. As you all know, Purdue brought in new defensive coordinator Bob Diaco back in January to fix a defense that really struggled under Nick Holt last season. Purdue was 12th in the Big Ten in scoring defense, 13th in total defense, and 12th in both passing and rushing defense. Purdue also finished with a -8 turnover margin, only forcing 15 turnovers in 12 games. Translation: the defense was really ineffective at getting off the field and really even more ineffective at making big plays. Now, thankfully, Purdue did not lose a whole lot on defense this offseason. Marcus Bailey, who missed the last 10 games of the 2019 season with a torn ACL, is your biggest departure from the Purdue defense. Bailey was drafted in the 7th round by the Cincinnati Bengals and actually played in his first NFL game this Sunday for the Bengals in their first win of the season. Bailey had a fantastic career at Purdue. He was excellent as a freshman in 2016 in Darrell Hazel's final year, continued to be really productive in Nick Holt's defense, and really will go down as one of Purdue's best defensive players in the last decade. He led the team in tackles in 2016 and 2018, second on the team in tackles in 2017, and of course, we'll never forget the highlight of his career when he picked off Dwayne Haskins and returned it for the final score of the 49-20 upset win over the Buckeyes on that crisp October night. Undoubtedly, Bailey is the biggest loss on defense as we turn to 2020, but there are a few more that are going to be felt this year on the defense. One of those is graduate transfer from Western Kentucky, Ben Holt, the son of former defensive coordinator Nick Holt. Made a really nice impact on the defense last year during his one season at Purdue. Led the defense with 114 total tackles. I think he could have been even more effective if Bailey was healthy. I don't know that Ben Holt was athletic enough to shoulder the load of being the middle linebacker in a 4-3 set in the Big Ten. I think he got exposed a little bit at times just for his lack of speed. But, at the same time, thank goodness Purdue got him from Western Kentucky. There's no telling where Purdue's defense would have gone without having Nick Holt in the middle last year. Really had a good year for Purdue and held the defense together even after the loss of Marcus Bailey. Navon Mosley had a nice career in the Purdue secondary, made 53 tackles last year, ranking 4th on the team. I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I don't think you want defensive backs loading up on tackles, but that was the case of the Purdue defense last year when a lot of run plays got to that third level of the defense. I don't know that I ever felt Mosley was a great defensive back for Purdue, but I do feel good about Purdue's options in the secondary this year, although Mosley did put together a nice career at Purdue. His loss is worth noting. And then finally, the other departure from the secondary that's really kind of interesting is defensive back Kenneth Major. He announced his intent to transfer in May and quickly landed at Middle Tennessee State. He got a lot of snaps early on last year, as well as got a lot of snaps in the 2018 season, but as we got into the season last year, kind of got beat out by freshman corner Corey Trice. Trice had a couple of interceptions in the win over Maryland, and that kind of was the writing on the wall for Kenneth Major. Didn't get a ton of snaps as the season progressed, and announced his intent to transfer, ended up with the Blue Raiders. I do believe he left as a graduate transfer. He would have 2 years of eligibility at Middle Tennessee State if that is the case and he were to get immediate eligibility. We do wish him the best in his future. Did some good things for Purdue and hope he can continue to do some good things down in the Conference USA. Now, as I mentioned at the top, Purdue is under the guidance of a new defensive coordinator this year, and that is Bob Diaco. A little bit about Diaco before we get into previewing the position groups of Purdue's defense. Diaco's familiar with the Big Ten, having played his college football as a linebacker for the legendary Hayden Fry at Iowa. Diaco was a two-time All-Big Ten selection there and bounced around the coaching tree a little bit, spent a lot of time at Eastern Michigan prior to getting his first defensive coordinator job at Cincinnati under Brian Kelly in 2009. Was the defensive coordinator for a Cincinnati team that was very good, did some really good things that year. And then Kelly took off to Notre Dame, and Diaco followed along to be the defensive coordinator in South Bend. It was in South Bend that Diaco really built that defense to an elite level, and it culminated in the 2012 season. Notre Dame finished 12-0 that year before losing to Alabama in the national championship game, and that was a team led by their defense, which allowed, I believe, 11 points a game. Diaco did earn the Broyles Award that year. That's an award given to the top assistant coach in the country. Very high praise for the defensive coordinator there. He took off after that for the UConn head coaching job ahead of the 2014 season. Didn't go well, went 2-10 in his first year, 6-7, making a bowl game in his second year, before really crashing and burning with a 3-9 season in 2016. That led to his firing. From there, he made one-year stops as assistants at Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Louisiana Tech. He is now in West Lafayette to replace Holt, who left based on, we'll call it a mutual agreement with head coach Jeff Brom back in December. Diaco likes to run a 3-4 base defense. I think we'll see some of that this year. It may be a multi-year transition into being exclusively 3-4 as a base. I don't think Purdue is necessarily as well suited to run the 3-4 this year as Bob Diaco would like. We have seen it a little bit in the 2021 class already, but look for Purdue to really recruit the linebacker position heavily to start building up some depth to run that 3-4 base where you have 4 linebackers on the field every first and second down. To get into the position groups here, going to take a look at what Purdue is going to look like everywhere on the defense this year. And starting up front on the defensive line, Purdue has some really nice pieces in a unit that needs to have a good year. As we mentioned, the run defense was terrible last year, and really starting up front to get a good push into the backfield to allow those linebackers to make tackles very quick into the play is where the defensive line needs to come through. As a freshman last year, the hometown hero, George Karlaftis, where else would we start? He had a fantastic year last year, earned freshman All-American honors, was named second team All-Big Ten. His 54 total tackles ranked third on the team. He tied for the team lead with 7.5 sacks. The future is really, really bright for Karlaftis. He now has some expectations to meet this year. We've seen him as the focal point of Purdue football marketing campaigns, given his local celebrity status, led Westside High School to a state championship game, looks to recruit his younger brother Yanni to Purdue now. But Karlaftis is a very, very good player, one of the top recruits Purdue has ever landed. And, we saw that as a true freshman last year as he started immediately, starting the season opener at Nevada. We're going to keep seeing good things from Karlaftis. I am very excited to see what he can do as an encore to one of the best freshman seasons we've ever seen from a Purdue defensive player. On the other side of him, on the nose tackle spot, Lorenzo Neal returns to the field after missing the entire 2019 season with a torn ACL. Neal tore his ACL in the 2018 Old Oak and Bucket game, and was never able to get back to full strength last year, battled some injuries, suffered in practice, and never saw the field. Neal is a big 315-pound defensive tackle. He earned honorable mention all-conference honors in 2018, the last time he saw the field. There was a little speculation that Neal was going to declare for the 2020 NFL Draft. That never came to fruition. Big returning player for Bob Diaco's defense. I cannot overstate the importance of having Lorenzo Neal in there. He will anchor the middle of a defense that really needs to step up and stop the run this year. I think he'll be able to do that. Last year without Neal, Purdue really had to turn to some inexperienced players, looking at Anthony Watts, looking at Branson Dean, looking at Lawrence Johnson, just some guys who Purdue wasn't really ready to play. And I think this year you're going to see those guys be better because of that, but having a potential NFL player like Lorenzo Neal at the center point of your defense is going to be really, really good for Purdue. The other defensive end spot in Diaco's 3-4 set is really up in the air. There are a lot of options to play that third down lineman. None of them are all that proven the way Karlaftis and Neal are. Sophomore Branson Dean got some time last year as a redshirt freshman. He makes a lot of sense to pick up the side opposite Karlaftis. Senior Anthony Watts certainly has the most experience of this group. Watts has played more of a defensive tackle than a defensive end role. I expect to see Watts on the field quite a bit this year, particularly if Lorenzo Neal isn't ready to carry a full starter's load at defensive tackle. In the press conference this past week, Jeff Brom did indicate that Neal is not 100% yet. Granted, that it was with more than 3 weeks to go until the season. Indicated that he thought Neal could be 100% by the time the Boilers kick off, but it will be important to follow that and to see where Lorenzo Neal is. Lawrence Johnson started 9 games for Purdue on the interior defensive line as a freshman last year when Lorenzo Neal was out. I don't think Purdue planned on playing him that quickly. It certainly showed at times, but Lorenzo Neal's departure caused Purdue to really adapt on the fly, and getting Lawrence Johnson some experience is going to ultimately be a good thing for this team. You have more players who are experienced now. You have more players who are capable of coming in and providing Purdue with some solid snaps. The other name I'd like to point out to watch is Jack Sullivan. The sophomore did play in all 12 games last year. I think he will see a much bigger role this year, especially if there's injuries that take place on the defensive end spots. He's another guy who probably could go outside linebacker as well if needed to be. I don't think it'd be ideal there, but he's a guy who's going to be able to see the field in a multitude of roles. Now, as I said, how much Purdue plays in the 3-4 compared to the 4-3 remains to be seen. Nick Holt was a 4-3 base defense guy. I think Karlaftis may be better suited for the 4-3, although I think he's versatile enough to succeed even in a Bob Diaco-style defense where he's going to be breaking through the inside of the defensive line more than he will the outside, the way he did last year. But, Lorenzo Neal's health is the biggest key for this unit to have a successful season. Purdue doesn't often have NFL-caliber defensive tackles right in the middle of that defense. They do in Lorenzo Neal. Purdue desperately needs him in the middle to stop the run, where Purdue allowed 4.7 yards per carry and 192 yards per game last year. I'm not terribly worried with finding that third starter to go alongside Karlaftis and Neal. I think Purdue has enough proven options that as long as Karlaftis and Neal stay healthy, the defensive line is going to have a strong season, and we're going to see some improved numbers because of that. Now, as we get into the linebacking core, I did forget to mention the really weird departure of Cornell Jones in the opener. But his loss does hurt Purdue this year. Played a lot of football for Purdue in 2018 and 2019. But at the end of the 2019 season, he entered the transfer portal and elected to be a walk-on at Florida State under new head coach Mike Norvell, and was quickly dismissed from the team in June. The reason for his dismissal was never made all that public, but he is now at the University of West Florida, the reigning Division II national champions. And, you can't help but wonder if that was really disappointing to Cornell, because, going from the Big Ten to Division II is quite the drop-off. I just don't think that was really what he had planned. But regardless, this is a linebacking core that's going to move on without him. But boy, could they really use him. We'll start off in the middle here. Derek Barnes was tied with George Karlaftis for the team lead with 7.5 sacks last year as a defensive end, but he'll be moving back to his natural position of linebacker, and he'll be anchoring this linebacking core, playing in one of the two inside spots in the 3-4. He started every game for Purdue the past 2 years, as a linebacker in 2018 and as a defensive end in 2019. His experience will be key for a very young linebacking group this year. I like Barnes a lot. He was excellent for Purdue as a defensive end, and it's been interesting to hear him talk in interviews about how he feels his experience as a defensive end will help him as a linebacker. I'm really high on him. It'll be interesting to see how much Purdue uses him as a pass rusher this year, after he really did show his ability to get into the backfield and make some explosive plays last year. Joining him on the inside will either be senior Samisi Fakasiecki or junior Jalen Alexander. Now, I personally prefer Alexander to Fakasiecki. I think Alexander has a little more upside, and Alexander certainly has played more football for Purdue in terms of game snaps. Fakasiecki did see a fair amount of action last year, making 38 tackles for Purdue. He's not the fastest guy at the linebacker position, but, if he's able to be solid in the run game and not let ball carriers advance to that third level, I think Fakasiecki can be a really productive linebacker for Purdue. Now, Jalen Alexander got some action as a true freshman in 2018, kind of a rarity, so obviously Purdue fans took notice very quick, and I just don't know that he really made the big jump from his freshman to sophomore year that sometimes you hope guys make. He didn't have a bad sophomore season, but I do think there were some fans who expected a little more, and he certainly was pressed into a bigger role with Marcus Bailey losing the majority of the season. This year, Alexander is probably the second most experienced guy at linebacker behind Derek Barnes, and that's going to put Purdue in a little bit of a hole here. Alexander or Fakasiecki, whoever gets that start against Iowa, and I do expect them both to play a good amount, they're really going to have to be big in stopping the run and not letting Iowa's running backs get too far down the field, because Purdue's going to need to make Iowa throw, and that's going to be the key for Purdue this year. They cannot be giving up 192 yards a game on the ground again. I don't expect them to, but looking at that other middle linebacker spot, Alexander, Fakasiecki, one of the two has to be pretty good this year, and ideally both of them have nice years where you can kind of interchange them out a little bit. The middle is where Purdue's lack of depth is most notable. The only other name I think is worth mentioning here is redshirt freshman Khalil Saunders. Only saw action in 3 games last year, preserving his redshirt status. There is some upside here. I think he could get some time this year, and he certainly will in 2021 once both Derek Barnes and Samisi Fakasiecki graduate. I think he'll get some time, maybe not a ton of time this year, but I do expect Khalil Saunders to see the field for Purdue this year. On the outside, of the 4-3 system. Purdue will utilize highly regarded junior college transfer DeMarcus Mitchell at one of the spots. Mitchell's a big body. He's 6'3", 270 pounds, and he will certainly need to adjust to the speed of Big Ten football very quickly. When Purdue does play with 4 down linemen, I could see Mitchell playing some there as well. At 6'3", 270, he's a big, big guy, so I think Purdue's going to want to utilize him where they can. I'm really excited to see him. I think Purdue is going to use him as a big part of the defense this year, but it's going to be really important for him to get up to Big Ten speed quickly. It's a big jump from junior college to the Big Ten, no matter what anyone says about, the talent being there or how good junior college ball is. Junior college football is very good, but it's not the Big Ten. It's just so much faster at the Big Ten level, and Mitchell's going to have to be ready to play that role and be ready to get after ball carriers because it's a whole new ball game this year. Opposite Mitchell, Purdue is going to turn to converted defensive back Jalen Graham at outside linebacker. The Detroit native began playing linebacker for Purdue last year as a true freshman, more out of necessity than anything. And it looks like his future is going to be at linebacker rather than safety. Might be a better fit, about 215 pounds and 6'3". Probably is a little bit better suited at linebacker than he is safety. Very athletic. And I can see Purdue moving into that direction at outside linebacker because they're going to want to have speed there. I like Graham a ton in his ability to cover receivers out of the backfield and to cover tight ends from the outside linebacker spot. I don't expect him to be as much of a pass rusher or a run stopper at that position, but I expect him to match up with tight ends or receiving backs, and I think he can be really effective in that role due to his experience as a safety. There aren't a ton of options at outside linebacker besides those two. Should injuries become a factor, I think you could see more converted defensive backs. I don't think that's necessarily ideal, but, this is a thin unit. Purdue's still trying to build up that defense that, they really patched up in 2017 in Brom's first year with some junior college transfers and graduate transfers. And now you're starting to see just, how barren the cupboard was when Daryl Hazel took off and Jeff Brom came back in. We're going to move to the secondary now, and this is the position group I'm the most excited to see this season. I'm not sure we've seen a secondary this athletic since the 2003 defense, and that's probably the best defense Purdue has had in the modern era. Sophomore Corey Trice, we'll start with him. He is a lock to start for the Boilers at one of the corner spots this year. I was really impressed with Trice's ability as a freshman last season, especially in the Maryland game where he had 2 interceptions, one of which was a big pick six right before the half that really kind of started to put that game out of reach. Trice is a big corner, 6'3". He's not the fastest, but his size should really help Purdue's red zone defense. He's going to be an every down corner for Purdue who can really make some plays. I think if you can match him up with a bigger receiver, he's going to do well. Any guy who's more of a possession receiver than a real speed demon, I think Trice is going to be the guy who gets that assignment, and I expect Trice to be successful in that role. Good athlete, really excited to see what he can do this year. DJ Johnson transferred to Purdue from Iowa back in June, following the revelation of a racially insensitive environment within the Hawkeye program. Johnson has yet to receive his immediate eligibility from the NCAA, but I cannot see any way he doesn't get approved and get 3 years of eligibility for Jeff Brom and the Boilers. He's an Indianapolis native who I think is going to be an impact player this year, assuming he can play. He played some corner and some safety at Iowa. I do expect him to play mostly corner at Purdue, and I expect him to play a lot of snaps immediately if his waiver is granted. I personally think if he's allowed to play, he will start alongside Trice, but there are certainly some other options to start at that second corner spot. One of those is junior college transfer Giovanni Howard. Howard's an exciting player. He's eager to get on the field. He's been very vocal about that on Twitter this offseason, and the Purdue fans have really gotten into firing him up on his social media accounts. But, similar to DeMarcus Mitchell, he's a junior college transfer. The game is going to speed up for him a lot this year, and the wide receivers he's going to be facing are going to be a little bit more explosive, a little bit faster, a little bit bigger than what he's used to seeing at junior college. I could see both Howard and Johnson playing corner, maybe playing some nickel this year, and even coming in on dime package downs for sure. I think you'll see both of them on the field. But I'm excited to see Howard. I think he's an interesting player for sure in the sense that, junior college corners, Purdue hasn't had a ton of those lately. But I think he's going to get in the mix early. I think he's going to see the field early, and we'll see what he can do for Purdue this year. A couple of returning contributors who probably aren't getting talked about enough are Dedrick Mackey and Simeon Smiley. Both guys have seen a lot of time for Purdue over the past couple years, all over the secondary, both guys playing in a safety, in a corner, in a nickel role. But I do expect to see both of them this year. I'm not sure I think either will start for Purdue, but their experience is going to be really important for Purdue in a secondary with a lot of new faces, albeit talented faces. But the experience Mackey and Smiley have in the Big Ten is going to be very important for Purdue's defense this year. Now, possibly my favorite player on Purdue's defense, sophomore Cam Allen, is going to be a starter at safety for the second straight year. Allen is a really hard-hitting safety who plays with a ton of energy. It didn't always work to his advantage last year. Remember him getting ejected from the Penn State game for a targeting call. But I love his game. I think he's going to continue to improve this year. And he's going to be a guy who has a really good career at Purdue. Starting as a freshman right away, the way Allen did, I think you look at a ceiling for him similar to a Stuart Schweigert type player. Now, that may be a little bit of high praise. I'm not by any means saying that I think Cam Allen will have the NFL career that Stu Schweigert did, but, he could be really good for Purdue, and I think by the end of his time at Purdue, he could be pushing for all-conference honors. Who's going to start next to him at safety? That's a very good question, and Purdue added Tyler Coyle in the transfer portal this offseason. He is a fifth-year senior grad transfer who led UConn in tackling a season ago. Look, experience is always welcome, and Coyle has played a ton of football. Yes, it was at UConn. Yes, UConn was terrible last year. Even the worst teams have to have a leading tackler, but his experience is welcomed, and I think he's going to start alongside Allen to begin the season. And that'll give Purdue a pretty experienced secondary. You have Allen, who started a lot of games last year. You have Coyle, who's played a ton of football over in the AAC. I'm in the air about how much upside I think Coyle has, but his floor is really high, and I think he can help bridge the gap to some of the young talent in the secondary. Who am I talking about with that young talent? Well, example number one is redshirt freshman Marvin Grant. He is a perfect example of that young talent. He's a former four-star recruit. He did deal with some injuries last year, and that's probably more than anything what kept him off the field and forced him to redshirt. But I would be absolutely shocked if we didn't see a good amount of Marvin Grant this year. He's fast, he's strong, he's athletic, and he has the ability to make game-changing plays in that secondary. And I think if you have Allen and Grant together back there, that's the most athletic pairing Purdue's had at safety in some time. Purdue has got to get him on the field. I know his inexperience will show at some point, as it always will for a freshman cracking into a Big Ten secondary for the first time. But he's going to be a guy who Purdue has to let grow. That way he's ready to carry a starting role in 2021 and beyond. Now, senior Brennan Thieneman is a high floor, low ceiling option at safety. He's played a lot of football for Purdue. He is limited in his ability. He's not the most athletic safety for Purdue, but at the same time, he has played a ton of football. We saw his brother Jacob have a fantastic career, which ultimately led to him getting a chance in NFL training camps. Jacob certainly will probably end up with a better career at Purdue than Brennan, but, Brennan battled back from a really gruesome injury in the Music City Bowl in 2018, got some good time last year, and he'll see the field some this year, as I think he should. But I do think Purdue would really like to see the younger players begin to emerge behind him. If a true freshman is going to break through in this group, and it is a deep group, so I don't know how much I see it, but I do like Anthony Romph, a true freshman from Michigan. He enrolled early, got to participate in Purdue's 8 spring practices, and I think he could have a really strong career at Purdue. Not sure how much time he'll see right away, but if someone is going to break through as a true freshman, it's going to be Anthony Romph. At the end of the day, I like this defense to take a big step up from last year. The numbers may be a little deceiving. Keep in mind, Purdue's only playing Big Ten opponents this year. It's an 8-game conference-only schedule. A lot of good teams on that schedule, so I don't know how much different it's going to look in scoring defense, but I think that's going to be the case across the board in the Big Ten as well. I don't think you're going to see the same numbers as normal because not every team, plays the same non-conference. And for some of those schools that tend to schedule an easier non-conference slate, which I'm a big proponent of, that does help your numbers quite a bit when a quarter of your season comes against a little bit lesser competition. Purdue has to make big plays and force turnovers better than they did in 2019. A turnover in a quarter a game is not going to cut it this year. Purdue has to get off the field, create big plays. They need Karlaftis, Barnes, Neal, Dean, everyone to get into the offensive backfield and make some plays happen back there. They need tackles for loss. They need fumbles. It's going to be interesting to see what Purdue can do this year. And if the run defense isn't improved, Purdue is really going to struggle in a Big Ten West that gets better and more physical every year. Now, to break down the special teams a little bit, this is Purdue's 4th straight year with a new special teams coach. This time it's Marty Biagi. He came to Purdue after 3 years as the special teams coordinator at North Texas. His special team units generated a lot of big plays in the Conference USA. They were excellent at creating touchdowns off of kick and punt returns, and he's going to look to bring that big play ability to a program in Purdue that hasn't had a lot of big special teams plays to write home about lately. They are anchored at special teams by 5th-year senior kicker J.D. Dellinger. He returns after a strong 2019 campaign where he was 13 of 16 on field goals and perfect on PATs. One thing that's overlooked, certainly, is Dellinger's decision to redshirt in 2018. He did this after a 2017 season where him and Spencer Evans really just played wheel of kickers all season in a Jeff Brom move that did not make any sense to me. But that allowed Evans to handle the kicking duties in 2018, and now we'll give Dellinger 2 full years as the starting kicker after he was excellent for Purdue in 2019. He showed a big leg when he connected from 53 yards out in the loss to TCU, and he also made a game winner at Northwestern, 39 yards out, that gave Purdue the 24-22 win in Aiden O'Connell's first start up in Evanston. He will continue to handle kickoff duties this year, and he did really well there last year. 2/3 of his kickoffs resulted in touchbacks. Should anything happen to J.D. Dellinger, his younger brother Edward is a freshman on the team this year, maybe the backup kicker, but the kicking game isn't Purdue's biggest worry. The worry is in the punting game. Brom used a scholarship on Brooks Cormier out of high school. Not always the most common thing to do for specialists. And Cormier disappointed a little bit last year. He struggled to get distance on his punts early on. He did improve as the year went on. He was splitting time with Zach Collins, a rugby-style punter. Don't know that Collins really overwhelmed either. Purdue's going to have to be better in the punting game this year. I think Cormier is going to get the first crack at punting, but Purdue needs this to be a strength. The defense is talented but unproven, and the defense can't be getting short fields to start every possession because Purdue couldn't punt effectively. This has to be an area where Purdue does well. Historically, Purdue has done well punting, thinking back to Carson Wiggs and Cody Webster, some guys who were very good for Purdue. Joe Shopper was excellent as well. Really need to see Purdue improve in the punting game. The return game is going to be fun for Purdue. In the last few weeks, it's gone from a question mark to a strength with Rondale Moore's return to the Boilermakers. Even when he was back there, though, Purdue has struggled in the return game a little bit. Purdue hasn't returned a kickoff for a touchdown since the first year of the Hazel era in 2013, when in reality, the kickoff return was probably Purdue's best hope of scoring a touchdown because that offense wasn't going to do it. Moore has the ability to be a game changer as a kickoff returner. We saw in 2018 teams start to kick away from him and kick towards Jackson Anthrop quite a bit. I expect to see Anthrop back deep alongside Moore again this year. Anthrop may not have the big play potential that Moore does, but he's as sure-handed as they come. Sometimes that matters a lot more than the potential to have a big explosive play. Moore will also field punts for Purdue. He struggled a little bit there last year from trying to do too much. He misplayed a couple of punts against Nevada, and I do believe he lost one of them in a fumble. Anthrop will be the other option behind Moore at punt returner, but it's going to be number 4 back there to field punts, and he will be hoping to take one back for a touchdown for the first time the Boilers have done that since Aaron Valentine back in 2009. Now, I'd like to thank everyone who reached out on Twitter this week. We have a great Q&A session about the Purdue defense. We're going to dive into that now. Anthony from north of the border in Ann Arbor, Michigan, wants to know, what player are you most excited about on defense, and do you see any freshmen making an impact on defense? George Karlaftis is the easy answer as he looks to build off his unbelievable freshman season. But as I said, the secondary has me really excited. I think Cam Allen is the guy who Purdue fans are going to fall in love with by the end of his career. I'm also really excited to see Marvin Grant, and he's a guy who's a freshman, certainly will make an impact this year. I probably look at Marvin Grant as the freshman making the biggest impact on defense. Also looking at Khalil Saunders there, and potentially Dante Hunter as guys who could make big impacts on defense this year. Brian, another guy from Michigan, wants to know, what do you see as being the biggest weakness on the defense this year? Brian, that's a good question, and it's an important one. The linebacking core is really shallow. I like DeMarcus Mitchell. He's a good addition, but that pressure to make a JUCO to Big Ten jump could be notable really early, especially in those first couple games in late October, early November. Purdue has to stay healthy at linebacker. With 9 games in 9 weeks, it may be inevitable that someone goes down. replacements are going to be really young, really inexperienced. I don't know that bodes well for a defense that struggled to run last year, but I do think the defensive line is set up for success, assuming Lorenzo Neal is able to go all season, and that secondary is talented enough that I'm not too worried there. So I'm really going to focus on the linebacking group as Purdue's biggest weakness on defense. The Mackey Maniacs want to know how I feel about the hire of Bob Diaco. I really like the experience Diaco brings to West Lafayette. At Notre Dame, his 2012 defense, as I mentioned in the open, was stellar. He was recognized for that season with the Broyles Award. Look, I know some people may be apprehensive due to his struggles when he was the head coach at UConn, but I don't know that I look at that as a negative. UConn is a brutal job, as we've seen now that they're moving as an independent in football. For some reason, Purdue's playing them the next year. I don't understand it, but, I liked his defense at Louisiana Tech. I think he carries some momentum from a good year last year, which culminated in a shutout of Miami, the Hurricanes, in a bowl game. I believe that was the Independence Bowl. And I do just look at his head coaching experience as a positive on the recruiting trail, and certainly his ability that he's gotten a defense to a national championship game. I view these as all positives. Purdue's defense have been at their best when they have talented pass rushers and can make big plays. Karlaftis is a talented pass rusher. I think Purdue's secondary is going to be able to make big plays with their athleticism, and I think that can force some game-changing turnovers, and I like Diaco's ability to get big plays made in Purdue's defense this year. Josh, with probably the best question anyone's asked on this episode, with Marcus Bailey gone to the NFL, who's the next player to step up as a vocal leader for the defense? That fantastic question. I think middle linebacker is probably the ideal position for the defense to have a vocal leader at. Purdue does have an experienced senior there in Derek Barnes. I look to him to be a leader, especially in the linebacking unit. As a fifth-year senior, Lorenzo Neal has played a ton of football for Purdue, and I think after missing the entire 2019 season, he's going to want to show some leadership ability as he figures to get some serious NFL interest. And I think finally, even as just a sophomore, George Karlaftis, you can look to him as a leader already. He's really embraced the idea of being the hometown kid, and he's really embraced the media attention that's come with that. I think Karlaftis is the best player on Purdue's defense, and I just think he's a really unique guy who embraces the attention well. I look to him as a good leader for Purdue. Sam wants to know who some potential breakout candidates are this year, looking for names that may not be as big, but could have a big impact this year. Marvin Grant is probably my first name there, and I know that's a little bit tough. He's one of the best recruits Purdue has gotten in the Brom era, but I'm just so high on his athletic ability and his natural ball instincts at safety. And if both of those can come together, I think he can be a really special player at Purdue. Now, if there are injuries at linebacker, Dante Hunter might be a name that comes into play. He's 6'4", 260 pounds as a redshirt freshman. I think he could really help the defense, especially if the run defense isn't much improved early on. With that big frame, I like him as a run stopper. He was an effective pass rusher in high school in a competitive area of Ohio. You can never have too many pass rushers. So I'll give those two as breakout candidates, and I certainly think this year is going to be important to lay the groundwork for big 2021 campaigns for both Marvin Grant and Dante Hunter. Our final question comes from Benjamin. He wants to know what makes Diaco a good or bad defensive coordinator. Certainly, Ben, more than anything, his track record makes him a good defensive coordinator. the defenses he ran alongside Brian Kelly, both at Cincinnati and Notre Dame, were really, really good. I think his work at Louisiana Tech last year almost served as a bounce-back season. He struggled at UConn. His defense at Nebraska was troubled from the start with almost a lame duck coach in Mike Riley. That was just destined to fail from the start. And then he spent a year as a linebacker coach at Oklahoma. But I really like this hire from Purdue. Diaco is still very young in the coaching industry at 47. He knows the Big Ten well, having played in the league, coached at Notre Dame, being very familiar with Big Ten teams. That was still when Notre Dame played Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue every year. And, spent a year at Nebraska just in 2017, a team that beat Purdue. I think all those things combined make Diaco a really good defensive coordinator, and I'm excited to see what he can do underneath Jeff Brom this year. That's all I have for this week's show. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Really enjoyed this episode. Please share it along with whoever you think needs a good preview of Purdue's defense this year. Next time on the show, we will continue our preview of the 2020 Boiler football team by taking a look at the offense in Jeff Brom's fourth season. If you want to get in on the Q&A sessions, give us a follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond and hit us up before next week's episode. We'll be back next Tuesday for more of the biggest news and high-level analysis of Purdue athletics, so be sure to tune in then. Until that time, stay safe.